Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This deep dive uses AI-generated narration based on human research and written material.
Glad to be here.
So I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow and being handed this rock-solid, ironclad guarantee.
Okay, I'm listening.
The guarantee is this: no one will ever be able to hurt you again.
Wow.
Right. You will never be forced to do anything against your will. You will never feel restricted, you'll have zero enemies, and you will suffer absolutely no emotional or psychological harm for the rest of your life.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like the pitch for a fraudulent online masterclass.
Totally.
Like the kind of thing you see aggressively advertised on social media at 2 a.m, promising enlightenment for just 3 easy payments of $99.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you saw that today, your immediate reaction would be to just flag it as a scam and keep scrolling.
Right, because we intrinsically know that life is suffering. Life is chaos.
Yeah, and to claim you can just become invincible to that chaos is completely absurd. But the crazy thing is, the promise we're exploring today isn't some modern grift.
No, it's a 2,000-year-old thesis.
Exactly. We are diving into a text known as the Enchiridion, specifically its first 10 chapters.
Which is just a foundational text.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the practical wisdom, the deeply uncomfortable moral insights, and the step-by-step life applications from this ancient manual.
Yeah, we really want to understand exactly how the author claims we can build this fortress of psychological invulnerability today.
Because beneath all our modern skepticism, I think we all desperately want to feel a little less fragile.
The word fragile is really key here, because to understand why this text is so powerful, you have to look at the person who actually wrote it.
Right, Epictetus.
Yeah, the Enchiridion, which translates from ancient Greek simply as a handbook or a manual, like something to be kept ready at hand. It's a distillation of the teachings of Epictetus.
And he was not exactly living an easy life, right?
Not at all. He wasn't some ivory tower philosopher sitting in a pristine garden theorizing about pain. He was born into slavery in the Roman Empire.
Which is just brutal to even think about.
It was horrific. He lived in brutal, oppressive conditions, and he also walked with a severe physical disability.
A limp, right?
Yeah, a limp that, according to some historical accounts, was actually the result of his enslaver deliberately breaking his leg.
See, that context changes everything. So when a man who has endured literal enslavement and permanent physical abuse tells you, hey, here is the formula to never being harmed or compelled against your will,
it carries weight.
It holds a completely undeniable authority. I mean, he stress-tested his own philosophy in the darkest possible conditions.
Exactly. And this is the bedrock of Stoicism, not the, modern internet bastardized version of Stoicism where you just repress your emotions and act like a cold, unfeeling robot.
Right, the whole alpha male don't cry ever thing. Yeah, that's nonsense. We're talking about the original, vibrant Greek and Roman philosophical system designed to help human beings navigate the profound unpredictability of the world.
And Epictetus builds his entire system of invulnerability on one brutal binary distinction. Like, if we don't grasp this very first rule, the rest of the handbook just completely collapses.
The Great Divide.
Yes, the Great Divide. This is chapter 1, where Epictetus establishes what is basically the physics of human agency.
He draws a line in the sand.
He draws a hard line and says, some things are within our power and some things are beyond our power.
Very binary.
Totally. So in the within our power column, he puts our opinions, our aims, our desires, and our aversions, basically our internal psychological operations.
It's our own affairs.
Right. And then in the beyond our power column, he places our bodies, our property, our reputations, our careers, and our social status.
And he doesn't just categorize them, He assigns them very specific weights.
What do you mean? Well, the things that are in our power, he says, are naturally free, unrestricted, and unhindered. They belong exclusively to you.
Okay.
But the things beyond our power are weak, dependent, restricted, and alien. They belong to circumstance.
Now, wait. I have to put the brakes on right here.
Sure.
Because my modern self-optimized brain is violently rejecting this idea.
I figured it would.
I mean, I understand that I control my opinions, but to say my body and my property are completely beyond my power?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Like, if I meticulously track my macros, wake up at 5 a.m., lift weights, and actively build my cardiovascular health, my body is absolutely the result of my power.
I hear you.
And if I, say, lock my money into a diversified trust fund after working 80-hour weeks for a decade, I have mathematically insulated my property.
You've mitigated risk. Yeah.
Right. So it feels incredibly defeatist, almost scientifically inaccurate to claim these things are weak, dependent, and alien.
Well, it feels defeatist to us because we have been raised in a culture that preaches the gospel of input equals output.
Hustle culture.
Exactly. We're told that if you hustle hard enough, you absolutely guarantee the outcome. But Epictetus is distinguishing between the process and the outcome.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Let's take your diversified trust fund example. Yes, you control the aim, the discipline, the choice to invest. That is your internal operation.
Right, I'm doing the work.
But what happens if the global banking system completely collapses? Or what happens if hyperinflation renders the currency worthless literally overnight?
I mean, yeah, it'd be ruined.
Your wealth is erased. And no amount of 500 AM grit can stop that macroeconomic event.
So it's about ultimate absolute control versus just having mere influence.
Yes. Think of it like a sailor on the ocean.
Go.
You have absolute control over how you tie the knots, how you read the charts, and how you set the sails. That is your domain.
Right, that's in my power.
But the ocean, the storm, the sudden rogue wave, the ocean is alien. It does what it does.
Wow, okay, yeah.
Epictetus is basically saying your body and your property are the ocean. You can set the sails, you can go to the gym, you can eat well, but a microscopic genetic mutation can trigger an incurable illness tomorrow.
Or like a distracted driver can cross the center line and take your mobility in a fraction of a second.
Exactly. If you stake your core identity on the belief that you control your body, reality will eventually break your heart.
That is so heavy, but so true. And the danger, according to the text, is the mixing up of these categories.
Yes, the confusion is where the suffering lives.
Right, because Epictetus warns that if you attribute natural freedom to things that are actually dependent, if you treat the ocean as if it's supposed to obey your commands, you will be hindered, you will lament, and you will find fault with both gods and men.
Which we see constantly.
All the time. People staking their entire emotional stability on things they don't actually own.
And the misery there is entirely predictable. I mean, when we demand that our reputation remains pristine in the minds of others,
Which is literally impossible.
completely impossible, because other people's minds are their own internal fortresses. But when we demand it, we become desperate, anxious people pleasers.
We just lose ourselves completely.
Yeah. The author points out that true freedom only arrives when you withdraw your demands from the external world and plant your flag exclusively in your internal world.
So if your goal is simply to have a virtuous aim, no thief can steal that from you.
Exactly. No market crash can bankrupt your character.
But practically speaking, how does Epictetus expect us to operate with this knowledge on a daily basis? Because he lays out some very strict mechanics in Chapter 2 regarding desire and aversion.
He maps out the psychology of expectation perfectly.
He does. He states that desire demands the attainment of what you want, and aversion demands the avoidance of what you hate.
Which is just a perfect diagnosis of the human condition, if you think about it.
It really is like when you desire something, you aren't just expressing a preference.
No, you're placing an order with the universe.
Yes. You are demanding that reality comply with your preference. And if it doesn't, Epictetus says you are disappointed.
Right. And conversely, if you are averse to something, say poverty or illness, and it happens to you anyway, you become wretched.
Wretched. I love that word for this. Disappointment and wretchedness are just the two default states of an undisciplined mind.
So true.
And to fix this, he prescribes a radical psychological restructuring.
Very radical.
He tells us we have to remove our habit of aversion from all external things. Sickness, death, poverty. Just remove your aversion to them.
Easier said than done.
Right. And he says apply it solely to our own internal moral failings. But then he goes a step further and prescribes what sounds like a completely impossible pill to swallow.
The big freeze.
Yeah. He says, for the present, you must altogether restrain desire. Just stop wanting anything.
It's the equivalent of a massive emotional budget freeze.
Tell me more about that analogy.
Well, imagine you are heavily in debt, financially speaking. A good financial advisor won't just tell you to buy cheaper luxury goods, right?
No, they'll cut up your credit cards.
Exactly. They will tell you to freeze your spending entirely until you learn the actual value of $1.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Epictetus is saying our emotional budget is currently a complete disaster. We are compulsively desiring things that we cannot control, constantly going into psychological debt when we don't get them.
We're over-leveraged on the external world.
Perfectly said. So the prescription is a hard freeze. Stop desiring outcomes entirely until you can retrain your mind to desire only good character.
Okay, I understand the logic of an emotional budget freeze in theory, but mechanically, neurologically, how do I actually execute that?
Right, in the real world.
Yeah, if my brain is flooded with dopamine because I intensely desire a promotion or a new house or some specific outcome, how do I just freeze it? We aren't monks sitting on a mountaintop.
And neither was Epictetus. I mean, this is the real genius of the text. He doesn't expect you to magically shut off your dopamine receptors.
Thank goodness.
The restraint of desire isn't about avoiding the biological sensation of wanting. It's about intercepting the narrative you attach to that sensation.
Intercepting the narrative.
Yeah, and modern neuroscience actually supports this beautifully. Dopamine is a neuromodulator of pursuit, right? It drives us toward a goal.
It's the craving molecule.
Exactly. And when we don't get the goal, dopamine drops below baseline, causing literal psychological pain.
Which feels awful.
So the Stoic practice is to decouple your core identity from the completion of that dopamine loop. You feel the pull of desire, but you introduce a micropause.
A micropause.
Yes. You say, okay, I feel the desire for this promotion, but I do not demand it. My character will remain intact whether the promotion arrives or goes to someone else entirely.
That micropause is everything. It's the moment of choice.
It is the only moment that matters.
But applying that in the abstract is one thing. Applying it when you are running late and stressed out on a Tuesday morning is another.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Which is why I want to shift to how a citizen of ancient Rome actually survived a trip into the city without losing their mind.
Ah, the bathhouse.
Yes. Epictetus gives us a perfect blueprint in chapter 4. He paints this super vivid sensory picture of the Roman bathhouse.
Because when we picture a Roman bath today, we usually imagine like a serene marble-lined spa with gentle harp music playing and eucalyptus steam.
Right, like a high-end resort.
But Epictetus just shatters that illusion. He tells his students to anticipate the reality of the public baths, which is people pouring out, pushing in, splashing, scolding, and pilfering.
Pilfering, meaning you'd be sitting in the hot water trying to relax, and a thief, a balneokleptes in ancient Greek, would literally steal your clothes off the bench.
It was a loud, chaotic, incredibly annoying public utility.
It was the ancient equivalent of navigating the DMV, or like a packed subway train at rush hour in mid-July.
Sweaty, crowded, terrible. Epictetus was addressing an audience dealing with constant grating friction every single day.
And his advice here is just an absolute masterclass in setting intentions.
It really is. He instructs his students that before they even step foot out the door, they must say to themselves, I will now go to bathe and keep my own will in harmony with nature.
I love that line. And keep my own will in harmony with nature. That is the secret architecture of a resilient day.
It's a dual-purpose intention, right?
Exactly. You aren't just going to the bathhouse to get clean. You have a primary internal goal running simultaneously with your secondary external goal.
Let's translate this to a 21st century commute for the listener.
Perfect.
Get into your car on a Tuesday morning. Normally, your singular aim is, I need to get to the office by 8:45 a.m.
Right. And that aim relies entirely on the ocean, to use our earlier analogy.
It relies on the external world cooperating. It relies on clear roads, functioning traffic lights, and other drivers actually being competent.
Which is a huge gamble.
It's a terrible gamble. So inevitably, a delivery truck breaks down, blocking 2 lanes. Traffic comes to a dead halt. Your singular goal is thwarted.
And what happens? Your blood pressure spikes. You grip the steering wheel, and you start screaming at the windshield.
You have become wretched.
Yes, because you encountered the thing, you were averse to a delay. But if you apply Epictetus's dual-purpose intention,
It changes everything.
before you put the car in drive, you say, I am going to drive to the office, and I'm going to keep my will in harmony with reality.
So when you hit that traffic jam, you experience a completely different psychological reality.
You remind yourself, wait, my goal wasn't just to commute.
My primary goal was to keep my mind tranquil and rational.
Right. And I cannot achieve my primary goal if I throw a massive tantrum over traffic.
The traffic jam is no longer an impediment to your day. The traffic jam actually becomes the day.
It is the gym where you exercise your philosophy.
I love that. It transforms the obstacle into the curriculum.
The chaotic Zoom meeting where your coworker keeps talking over you, the flight delay, the passive-aggressive email you just got, these aren't interruptions to your life. They are the bathhouse.
But, realizing the bathhouse is chaotic doesn't automatically stop your nervous system from reacting to it.
No, biology still happens.
Right. To actually stay calm when someone is screaming at you or when you lose your job, the author demands we completely rewire how we perceive the mechanisms of the universe itself.
Which brings us to chapter 5. And this chapter contains what is arguably the most consequential sentence in the entire Stoic canon.
It is literally the direct precursor to modern cognitive behavioral therapy.
CBT.
Yes.
The text reads, and I quote, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things."
Not by things, but by the views. It is a massive paradigm shift.
Epictetus is basically arguing that events in the world have no inherent emotional charge whatsoever.
Right. A lost job, an insult, a broken leg. These are objective, neutral facts of existence.
They just are.
They just are. The emotional suffering, the disturbance is artificially generated in your own mind by the story you tell yourself about the event.
And to prove this, he brings out the heaviest possible artillery. He points to Socrates, and he uses the ultimate human fear, which is death.
The ultimate test of the theory.
Exactly. He argues that death cannot be inherently, objectively terrifying. Because, he says, if terror was a physical property of death, the way heat is a physical property of fire, then death would burn everyone equally.
Everyone would be terrified in the exact same way.
Right. But Socrates faced his execution by drinking hemlock with legendary serene composure. I mean, he drank it while chatting philosophically with his friends.
Completely calm.
Therefore, Epictetus concludes, the terror does not exist in death itself. The terror exists solely in our notion, our judgment, our opinion of death.
And if you look at this through the lens of modern psychology, specifically Albert Ellis's rational emotive behavior therapy or Aaron Beck's CBT, they explicitly cite this exact quote from Epictetus.
That's wild. That's the foundation of modern therapy.
It is, and modern neuroscience shows us the actual mechanics of this. Like when an event happens, say, your boss sends a really terse email.
Oh, the dreaded "we need to talk" email.
Exactly. Your sensory organs take in the data. That data hits the amygdala, which is the primitive threat detection center of the brain.
The lizard brain.
Right. But before you consciously feel an emotion, that data is routed through the prefrontal cortex, which is the meaning-making center.
Okay, so it gets processed.
Yeah. If your prefrontal cortex labels the email, "Oh my God, I'm going to be fired and end up homeless," the amygdala triggers a massive cortisol spike. You feel panic.
But the panic didn't come from the email itself.
No.
The email is just pixels on a screen. The panic came entirely from the interpretation.
Precisely. Epictetus is telling us to seize control of the prefrontal cortex, to intercept the meaning-making process before it ruins us.
And to help us track our progress in doing this, he outlines 3 distinct stages of philosophical growth.
I love this framework.
It's so good because it's a mirror we can hold up to ourselves. So stage 1 is the uninstructed person.
The baseline.
This is the person who reproaches others for their own misfortunes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm miserable because my spouse doesn't appreciate me.
Or I'm stressed because the economy is rigged.
I'm angry because the barista messed up my order.
Oh.
The locus of control is entirely external. They are internal victims of the bathhouse.
Then we reach stage 2, which is the person entering upon instruction, the beginner.
Okay.
This person realizes that their own judgments are actually the source of their pain. So what do? They reproach themselves.
Right, they turn it inward.
They say things like, I'm anxious because I'm overthinking again. I'm angry because my Stoic practice is weak today. I'm failing because I didn't optimize my mindset.
Wait, isn't that a good thing, though? Like taking extreme ownership of your reactions.
It's a necessary transitional step for sure, because the locus of control does move internally, but it's deeply hazardous.
Why?
Because it breeds toxic self-blame. You just replace the resentment of others with resentment of yourself.
Oh, I see.
It's a very heavy, guilt-ridden phase where people often burn out on self-improvement because they feel like they are constantly failing to be perfect.
Which makes stage 3 so liberating. The perfectly instructed person.
The master.
Epictetus says this person reproaches neither others nor themselves. But wait, why no self-reproach? How do they maintain accountability without self-blame?
Because the perfectly instructed person sees the universe objectively. If an external event goes wrong, they don't blame others because they know it was out of their control anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if they make an internal error, like if they lose their temper, they don't flagellate themselves. They observe the error neutrally, recalibrate their judgment, and step back into harmony with nature.
It's like a scientist observing a failed experiment.
That's a great way to put it.
The scientist doesn't hate themselves because the chemical reaction failed. They just adjust the formula and try again.
Exactly. No shame, just recalibration.
And the ultimate application of this objective, unshakable perspective is found in Chapter 9, where Epictetus addresses his own physical reality.
This is such a powerful passage.
He says, sickness is an impediment to the body, but not to the will unless it self-pleases. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will.
Just incredible.
As we discussed earlier, the man walked with a broken leg. The sheer audacity of him writing that lameness doesn't touch his will, it honestly gives me chills.
It is the ultimate reclamation of human dignity. He is stating, as a matter of biological fact, that his leg is impeded. He isn't living in denial.
No toxic positivity here.
Not at all. But he draws this impenetrable fortress wall around his prohairesis, his moral center, his capacity to choose his attitude. He essentially says, you can chain my leg, but not even Zeus can conquer my will.
It's radical empowerment.
Unbelievably radical.
But claiming this invulnerability when dealing with a broken leg or a traffic jam or a terse email is one thing. What happens when the stakes aren't just your own body or your daily annoyances?
The really hard stuff.
Yeah. What happens when the stakes involve the people you love most in the world? Because chapters 3 and 7 push this philosophy into territory that is deeply, profoundly uncomfortable.
We have to wade into the hardest parts of the text now.
We do.
The parts that make modern readers want to just throw the book across the room.
Let's start with chapter 3. Epictetus instructs his students on how to handle the things they, quote, tenderly love.
Okay.
He says we must constantly remind ourselves of their nature, starting with the smallest items. If you have a favorite ceramic cup, remind yourself this is just a cup.
Right. So when it breaks, you aren't crushed.
Exactly. That way, when it inevitably shatters on the kitchen floor, you don't have an emotional breakdown. Non-attachment to objects. We all understand that.
But then he scales the exact same logic up to human beings.
And this is where it gets crazy.
He says, and I quote, if you embrace your child or your wife, remind yourself that you embrace a mortal, and thus, if either of them dies, you can bear it.
Remind yourself you are kissing a mortal. I'm going to speak for everyone listening right now. My entire being recoils at that sentence.
It's a very natural reaction.
It sounds sociopathic. It sounds like a defense mechanism built by someone who is terrified of real intimacy.
I completely understand why you feel that way.
And he doubles down on it in chapter 7 with this haunting voyage analogy.
The voyage analogy is one of the most famous metaphors in all of Stoicism. Epictetus says that life is like a ship anchored at a port. You, the passenger, have gone ashore to fetch water.
Just going about your business.
Right. While walking on the beach, you might pick up a seashell or a truffle to amuse yourself, but your attention must always remain on the ship, listening for the captain's call.
Okay.
Because when the captain calls, you must drop the truffle, drop the shell, run to the ship, and never look behind. If you resist, you'll be bound and dragged aboard like a sheep.
And he doesn't leave it abstract. He explicitly connects the shells and truffles to our loved ones.
He goes right there.
He writes, if instead of a truffle or a shellfish, a wife or child be granted you, there is no objection. But if the captain calls, run to the ship, leave all these things, and never look behind.
It is a staggering passage.
It's horrific. If my kid is a seashell, what is the point of love? The protective fight-or-flight instinct of modern parenting demands that I would tear the ship apart, I would fight the captain to the death before I ever dropped my child on a beach and walked away without looking back.
The resistance you're feeling is visceral.
How do we extract any enduring wisdom from a text that essentially demands cold, unfeeling detachment from our own families?
Your reaction is exactly why we need to apply deep historical context here and exercise wisdom with discernment.
Please, because I am struggling with this one.
First, we must understand the world Epictetus was surviving in. The Roman Empire had a staggering child mortality rate. Some historians estimate that up to half of all children did not survive to their 10th birthday.
Half. That is just unfathomable.
Disease, sudden plagues, political purges. Death was not an abstract concept hidden away in sterile hospitals like it often is for us today. It was a visible, daily neighbor.
So it was just a constant reality.
Yes. If a parent in the ancient world attached their entire psychological survival to the physical longevity of their child, they were practically guaranteeing their own destruction.
So his instruction wasn't about suppressing love. It was about preventing total psychological annihilation.
Exactly. The text acknowledges that these are people you, quote, tenderly love. The Stoics were not unfeeling sociopaths.
Right.
But the author is trying to dismantle the illusion of permanence and the intense entitlement we feel to the future. Modern medicine has given us the illusion that an 80-year lifespan is a guaranteed right.
We really do feel entitled to it.
And when the universe breaks that unwritten contract, the grief is compounded by a sense of profound injustice. We scream, "This wasn't supposed to happen."
So the captain calling is fate. It's the inevitable turning of the universe.
Yes. The captain is death, or the logos, the natural order of things. When the call comes, grief is natural. Tears are natural. Epictetus isn't saying don't cry,
Okay, that helps a little.
but fighting the reality of death, demanding that the universe rewind time. That is what requires you to be dragged onto the ship, kicking and screaming.
But practically speaking, for a modern listener, if I'm tucking my kid into bed tonight and I force myself to think, he might die tomorrow, he is immortal, doesn't that just invite crippling anxiety into a beautiful moment?
Not necessarily.
Doesn't it rob the present of its joy?
It only invites anxiety if you are still trying to control the outcome. The wisdom Epictetus is offering is the shift from ownership to stewardship.
Stewardship over ownership.
The anxiety comes from thinking this is mine and I must protect it forever.
Which is impossible.
Right. The freedom comes from thinking this does not belong to me. It is a gift on loan from the universe. When you recognize that your loved ones are temporary gifts, you don't love them less.
You probably love them more.
You love them with a fierce, crystalline presence. You stop checking your phone while your child is talking to you because you realize the finite, fragile reality of the moment. You hold them with an open hand rather than a clenched fist.
Holding the people we love with an open hand.
It's beautiful, really.
It is the hardest spiritual discipline imaginable, but I do see the profound grace in it now. You don't own them, you just get to marvel at them for however long the universe allows.
And that level of mastery, the ability to hold the heaviest losses with grace, doesn't just happen overnight.
No, definitely not.
You don't just wake up one day and conquer the fear of death. You have to build the internal muscles first, using daily minor annoyances as your weight room.
Which takes us right into the practical application segment 4 of our deep dive.
The internal toolkit.
Exactly. Epictetus gives us the daily exercises required to build this psychological fortress. And Chapter 6 addresses a pitfall that is so hilariously relevant to the 21st century, it feels like it was written yesterday.
It really does. It's the illusion of merit.
The analogy of the handsome horse. Let's unpack it.
Epictetus warns us against feeling pride or elation at any excellence that is not our own. He says, if a horse looks in the mirror and says, I am handsome, that's fine. The horse has merit.
Good for the horse.
Right. But if you, the owner, walk around bragging, look at my handsome horse, you are a fool.
Because you are taking pride in the horse's merit, not your own. You have achieved nothing.
He asks a piercing question. What then is your own?
And his answer is laser-focused. He says, the use of the phenomena of existence, meaning your character.
Yes. How you interpret and respond to reality that is the only thing you actually possess.
I call this the epidemic of rented merit. Our entire modern flex culture is built on renting merit from external things.
Oh, absolutely.
We brag about the logo on our designer bag, the horsepower of our leased luxury car, the zip code we live in, or the prestige of the university we attended. We staple our fragile egos to these external objects and institutions, parading them around exactly like the handsome horse.
We use them to outsource our self-esteem.
100%.
But Epictetus strips that completely bare. The engineering of the sports car is the merit of the engineers in Germany. The stitching on the bag is the merit of the artisan in Italy.
The wealth you inherited is the merit of your grandparents.
None of that makes you an excellent human being.
The only time you are permitted to feel a sense of pride is in your use of those things.
Exactly, the use of the phenomena.
If you have wealth, the wealth is not your merit. But if you use that wealth with profound generosity and wisdom, the generosity is your merit.
That's yours.
If you are driving that luxury car and it gets a flat tire in the pouring rain, and you maintain your composure and treat the tow truck driver with respect, that composure is your merit.
It relocates the source of your identity from the fragile external world to the untouchable internal world.
Which is just bulletproof.
It is. Because if your identity is tied to your bank account, a recession can destroy your sense of self. If your identity is tied to your character, you are untouchable.
And this internal grounding is what allows you to execute the profound simplicity of Chapter 8. Epictetus writes, "Demand not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and you will go on well.
It is breathtaking. It is the ultimate formula for tranquility. Stop arguing with reality.
But again, I have to play the skeptic for the listener here.
Go for it.
If I just wish events to happen exactly as they do, don't I become entirely passive?
A lot of people think that.
If I see a gross injustice in my community, or if I'm passed over for a promotion I worked hard for and deserved, does Stoicism demand that I just roll over and accept it as the will of the universe? Am I just supposed to be a doormat?
This is perhaps the most common misunderstanding of Stoicism out there. Acceptance does not mean apathy.
Okay, clarify the difference.
Let's refer back to the very first chapter. Your aim is in your control. You are entirely permitted, even required by Stoic ethics, to aim for justice, to advocate for yourself, to take vigorous, decisive action in the world.
So you still fight for things?
Absolutely. But the outcome of that action belongs to the universe. Epictetus is saying, take the action, fight the good fight, but once the dust settles and reality delivers its verdict, you must accept that verdict without throwing a tantrum.
So it's about separating effort from outcome. I put in the maximum effort, but I don't demand the outcome.
Exactly. And if we zoom out and look at comparative insight, this ancient Mediterranean concept of aligning your wishes with reality mirrors some of the deepest wisdom traditions across the globe.
Really? Like what?
Specifically, it has massive overlaps with the Taoist concept of Wu Wei.
Wu Wei. How does that connect here?
Wu Wei is often translated from ancient Chinese as non-action or effortless action, but doesn't mean doing nothing.
Right.
Think of a river flowing down a mountain. When the water encounters a massive boulder, it doesn't get angry. It doesn't demand that the boulder move out of its way.
It doesn't throw a tantrum.
Exactly. It doesn't exhaust itself trying to smash through solid granite.
Yeah.
The water simply flows around the rock, finding the path of least resistance.
Yet it ultimately carves canyons.
Yes. Wu Wei is the practice of moving in harmony with the current of reality, rather than fighting it. Epictetus is teaching the exact same mechanics here. When you encounter a boulder, a canceled flight, a sickness, a rejection, don't waste your energy demanding the boulder disappear.
Wish for the boulder to be exactly what it is and gracefully navigate around it.
You got it.
You argue with reality, reality wins 100% of the time. So the Enchiridion tells us to just agree with reality, and suddenly we become undefeated.
It's a cheat code for life.
But how do we actively navigate those boulders in real time? How do we find that effortless action when we're under pressure? That brings us to Chapter 10, which I think provides the ultimate actionable toolkit for the modern listener.
Chapter 10 is where the philosophy becomes a true daily utility.
Epictetus instructs us that for every accident or event we encounter, we must turn inward and inquire what faculty we possess to handle it.
A faculty being a specific mental tool, a character strength.
Right. He operates on the assumption that we are all walking around with a fully stocked internal toolbox, but we just forget to open it when life gets hard.
We panic instead of looking in the box.
Exactly. And he gives 3 brilliant, concrete examples. The first one, if you encounter a handsome person, you will find continence or self-restraint is the faculty needed.
Meaning, if you feel the powerful pull of physical attraction or lust, especially in a situation where acting on it would be destructive to your life or marriage, you don't panic.
You don't blame the other person for tempting you.
No, you simply pause, recognize the sensory data, open the toolkit, and say, this situation requires continence. I have that tool, let me apply it.
The second example.
Yeah.
If you encounter pain, then fortitude is the faculty needed.
Fortitude. Yeah.
You get a migraine, you stub your toe, you have to endure an agonizing physical therapy session. The pain is no longer a meaningless tragedy. It is a prompt.
A prompt from the universe.
It is the universe handing you an opportunity to practice the specific skill of endurance.
And the third example is arguably the most socially applicable one today. Epictetus says, if you encounter reviling, which means insults, harsh criticism, or people talking down to you, then patience is the faculty needed.
Okay, let's pause here.
Sure.
Applying patience sounds great on paper. But practically speaking, if I'm in a meeting and my boss actively insults my intelligence in front of my entire team, my biological fight or flight response is instantly triggered.
Of course it is.
My heart rate spikes, adrenaline floods my system, and my ego screams for retaliation. Does Epictetus expect me to just robotically override my central nervous system and say, I am deploying patience now?
He doesn't expect you to be a robot. He expects you to be a master of the pause.
The pause again.
Always the pause. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and drew heavily on Stoic ideas, famously wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space.
And in that space lies our freedom to choose.
Yes. When your boss insults you, that is the stimulus. The adrenaline spike is biology. But the response, retaliating, shrinking in shame, or remaining calm, happens in that tiny gap of space.
So Epictetus is trying to train you to expand that space.
Exactly. You feel the adrenaline, you take a breath, and you observe the insult not as a threat to your physical safety, but as an external noise that has no power over your internal citadel.
It's reframing the insult from a weapon into a sparring partner.
I love that.
The boss isn't actually hurting me. The boss is just providing the resistance I need to practice my patience muscle. It turns life into a training ground.
And look at the ultimate promise Epictetus makes at the end of chapter 10. He says, "And when thus habituated, the phenomena of existence will not overwhelm you."
The phenomena of existence will not overwhelm you.
It's a huge promise.
When you habituate this reflex, when your default response to adversity shifts from, why is this happening to me, to what tool do I need right now, you become psychologically untrippable.
You achieve the exact invulnerability we talked about at the top of this deep dive.
Not because bad things stop happening, but because you possess the perfect tool to digest every bad thing that occurs.
It's the ultimate democratization of resilience. You don't need money, you don't need status, and you don't need optimal health to practice this. You just need your own mind.
And that leads to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with, pulling from a tiny, easily overlooked phrase in chapter 1.
Which phrase is that?
Epictetus advises his students to say to every harsh or unpleasing thing they encounter, "You are but a semblance, and by no means the real thing."
A semblance, an impression, an illusion.
Exactly. So I wanted to challenge you, the listener, to run an experiment tomorrow morning.
A little homework.
Just a little bit. When the very first thing goes wrong, and something will go wrong, you'll spill your coffee on your shirt, the train will be delayed, or you'll open your inbox to an incredibly rude email.
C'est inevitable.
When that inevitable friction occurs, what would change if you treated the obstacle not as a minor disaster, but purely as an illusion?
A simulation.
A semblance designed specifically by the universe to test whether you remember how to open your internal toolkit. What if you looked at the spilled coffee and said, a test of fortitude, I have that?
It completely flips the script.
How much lighter, how much more frictionless would your day be? If you realize the world isn't happening to you, it's just offering you a gem to train your character.
It changes the entire texture of your life. It takes the heavy, chaotic, solid weight of the world and makes it completely manageable. You realize you had the keys to the fortress all along.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you next episode.